Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. We are going to go over, once again, safety and health programs or safety and health management system. It's important because I want to revisit this topic. I get a lot of questions on what should go into our safety program, what needs to be covered, what does the safety program mean? Is it just a written paper that explains what we do or how we manage safety? So I'm going to break it down for you in this episode. In a nutshell, I'm going to start at high level. Any safety and health program or safety and health management system, it basically provides systematic policies, whether that be procedures or practices that are adequate to recognize and, of course, protect employees from occupational safety and health hazards. That is, hazards they would encounter or may encounter in the workplace or as a direct result of their occupation. Now, an effective safety and health management program includes provisions for the systematic identification, evaluation, and prevention, or at least control, of general workplace hazards, job-specific hazards, or even potential hazards that may arise from foreseeable conditions that you would reasonably be able to anticipate as a result or arising as a result of the work your employees are going to be doing. Now, in order to be effective, the program will also look past specific OSHA regulations, and it should seek to address hazards and prevent injuries and illnesses, whether or not compliance is an issue. Let me repeat that. You should be able to look beyond specific OSHA regulations and seek to address hazards that prevent injuries and illnesses, whether or not compliance is at issue, okay? Go above and beyond whenever you can. It doesn't matter if there's a specific regulation. If anybody, a regulator, an attorney, or an outside consultant, if anybody could come into the workplace and say, all right, you don't really need a regulation for that, that is reasonable to anticipate being a hazard related to the work you have your employees doing, you're required to address it. Essentially, you have the general duty to provide a workplace free of recognized hazards. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Go beyond basic compliance. Now, the phrase safety and health program is synonymous with other terms like safety and health management systems, but it's not limited to that. It's not limited to injury, illness prevention programs, things like that, or accident prevention programs. Whatever you call it, the common goal of these approaches is to help you, the company, the employer, reduce workplace injuries, illnesses, and fatalities through a systematic process that proactively addresses workplace safety and health hazards. Proactively, not reactively. Don't wait until something happens and then say, we really should issue personal protective equipment for our workers. Be able to break down the work you're going to have them do and assess that ahead of time. Now, we'll get into that, but you got to keep something else in mind here. In a nutshell, while not required by federal OSHA, all employees covered by the Occupational Safety and Health Act are going to benefit from implementing a safety and health program. Basically, you want to pull together all the regs and regulations that do apply to you, and you want to kind of put them in a specific order and document how you're going to address them. And the easiest, most effective way to do that is through a written program. Now, the program would apply to hazards covered by that general duty clause I mentioned, that general duty to provide a workplace free of recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. You're also going to want to apply specific OSHA standards as well. So your written program would need to cover general duty clause as well as specific OSHA regulations. So it's going to require you to be familiar with these OSHA regs. Now, for multi-employer work sites, like construction sites or manufacturing sites that have a lot of contractors come in, or maybe you have temp workers, multi-employer work sites, the program should be coordinated and communicated with those other employers to ensure that the host employer, you, and the contractors or subcontractors or temporary staffing agencies, whatever, that you all understand the respective responsibilities for controlling hazards on the site. Okay, so a little bit of history here. I mentioned that, federal regulations don't specifically require a written safety program. OSHA issued its first safety and health program management guidelines back in 1989. Then in 1998, they issued a draft proposed rule that would have required employers in general industry and maritime industries to establish safety and health programs. But that proposal never really got finalized, and of course it was withdrawn back in 2002. But in November of 2015, OSHA updated its 1989 guidelines in a draft which has not been finalized, and that guidance document is called OSHA Safety and Health Program Management Guidelines. Neither the existing 1989 nor the draft 2015 guidelines are standards or regulations, meaning they cannot be enforced per se, nor do they create an obligation under the OSHA Act. But some state workplace safety and health guidelines require, as well as workers' compensation agencies, require some written programs be in place. So you're going to want to check your state or state workers' comp requirements. Okay, getting back to the 39-page 2015 draft of the guidelines, these are the latest recommendations from the agency, but let's kind of break that down. They have specific elements. The first being management leadership. That is the expectation that leadership communicates the commitment to a safe and healthy worksite, and also a commitment to a safety and health program. It should define the program's goals and expectations, and it should also spell out the allocation of resources and expectation of performance for employees. A lot of handbooks that come out of HR will, or employee handbooks will have this information in there. Another aspect or a key aspect of the program would be worker participation. This can be addressed by encouraging workers to report safety and health concerns or unsafe conditions when they see them. It should also encourage workers to participate in the program actively by, joining a safety committee or participate in a safety suggestion program, things like that. You can also involve workers in aspects of the program by creating incentives for their active participation. Remember, when it comes to incentives, stay away from creating bonuses or payouts just for not having OSHA recordable injuries. You want to avoid those. You want to encourage or actually reward employees for participating in identifying hazards and helping to mitigate them. You want to give workers just full access to safety and health information. They're the ones that are working with the tools and equipment and materials. They're the ones facing the hazards. They should know what the requirements are, and they should have some training in those regs. Also, work hard to remove any other barriers to participation, like just even the sense of, being punished or disciplined for reporting issues or hazards, especially injuries. Work really, really hard to get rid of or drive out that fear that may be stopping workers from participating or reporting issues. Your employees are going to be the eyes and ears out there on the shop floor or on the job site. And if there is animosity or fear or anything that's keeping them quiet, the employer's really never going to know what's going on out there. And that's just a recipe for disaster, not just injuries, illnesses, or worse, potential fatalities, but also regulators that come in and find issues and evidence of them being persistent in the workplace for some period of time. And the employer wonders why. You need to work really, really hard at creating a culture that is comfortable coming forward and raising concerns. best way to do that is to walk the walk, have leadership out on the shop floor or out on the job sites asking questions, pointing to things, saying, hey, how long has that been like that? What do you need to get that fixed? Or, how many of these do you need replaced? Let me get my pen and paper, we'll write this down. You demonstrate through your actions that it's okay to bring these issues up. Another aspect of a safety and health program is hazard identification and assessment, having a structured process in place to identify hazards, assess them, break them down, and then of course correct them. You want to collect existing information about workplace hazards. What are the typical hazards you'll have? If you have a machine shop, it's going to be lockout, tagout, machine guarding, maybe lacerations. So PPE is going to be an issue. Maybe it's lifting or ergonomics if you do a lot of warehouse type work. Identify the hazards associated with the core work that your folks are going to be doing and break it down, come up with corrective actions from there. You're going to also have to inspect the workplace, and you should do that on a regular schedule. So develop a rhythm based on the severity of the hazards, a rhythm around how frequently you would inspect the workplace, and make sure you document this. You can do this with standard checklists that you develop, or going off of regulatory requirements, minimum requirements, and checking again workplace conditions against those regs. You're also going to want to conduct incident investigations, not just incidents that result in injury or illness, but what about an unplanned event that does not result in an injury, illness, or property damage? We call that a near miss. That's a freebie. You have an opportunity to investigate that as if there were an injury, illness, or property damage. And it's an opportunity for you to mitigate those root causes and prevent something from happening. Don't just write off a near miss as, wow, we got lucky, he was really paying attention, good for him, and then move on. The next time you revisit this issue, maybe somebody needing stitches, having a broken bone, or worse. So take the opportunity with a near miss to investigate it as if it weren't a near miss, as if it did result in an injury, illness, or property damage. Make sure you identify hazards associated with emergency and non-routine situations. You're going to need to conduct emergency evacuation drills, whether it's severe weather, whether it's a fire, maybe a chemical spill. If you've identified specific hazards related to your facility or your job sites, you should drill for those, and you should do that at least annually. Make sure you characterize the nature of the hazards that you identified, whether it's determine the controls to be implemented as well. So if it's machine guarding, you're going to want to go for engineering controls. If it is some sort of hazard related to manually handling parts, maybe it's gloves or PPE, something like that. Also, be able to prioritize the hazards so that you can choose the appropriate control. There's something known as the hierarchy of controls. You're going to want to eliminate the hazard altogether, or you're going to want to engineer a control for the hazard. So remove the human element, engineer it like a guard, so you can't even get to the hazard. You're going to use administrative controls or work practices to control that hazard, or you're going to put the operators in PPE of some kind. So that's the lowest form of control, highest being elimination and engineering. Okay. Well, what you can do is you can ask yourself some questions. You can say, hey, we have this hazard. One, how often do workers perform the task associated with that hazard? If it's several times a day and you have multiple employees doing that, that's going to be really frequent. And then the second question after you've determined that answer is you say, okay, so if an injury or illness were to occur, what is the probability of severity? How severe would it be? If it's pretty high and they're exposed frequently, you're going to want to go with elimination or engineering controls. If it's a very minor injury, like maybe a first aid at worst, and they rarely do it, then you can maybe go to a lower form of control, like work practice, like work instruction, signs, warning labels, and issue some PPE depending upon the hazard. But you being able to sort of prioritize the hazard is going to be key. That's what's going to tell you the level of control you want to implement. Okay, remember, the frequent injury, frequent exposure, high potential for injury, you're going to want to go with engineering controls. Low potential for injury severity and not very often you're exposed, you can go with a lower control. You can't mix the two though, right? You can't say, well, we only have an operator doing this like maybe once a month, but the potential for injury is really high, like a fatality. You still want to go with engineering controls or elimination because of the injury potential. But maybe you can, lock that area off and limit it to only one highly trained operator that when they go do it, it's a combination of work practices, PPE, and then maybe a supervisor, buddy system overseeing that. So you can mix some controls in there, right? So make sure you identify and prioritize the hazards so you can pick the appropriate control. So another element of your safety and health management system would be hazard prevention and controls, which we just talked about. Identify the different control options that you have. Make sure you select them appropriately, as we just discussed. And that should be, of course, controls to protect workers during non-routine operations and emergencies as well. So don't forget that. Maintenance workers are, subject to this. They'll do a lot of their work as sort of one-off or non-routine type of work. Stuff they only have to do once every 18 months or every other year, changing out certain filters in your facility, getting onto the roof to check HVAC systems, that kind of stuff, non-routine stuff. Make sure you cover that as well and you evaluate that. Of course, you're going to need to implement the selected controls in the workplace. So you're going to need employee participation to implement controls. You're also going to need them to sustain them and not bypass them. So that's going to bring me to the next element of the safety and health management system, which is education and training. You're going to need to provide program awareness training, basically saying, hey, we have a safety program in play for your protection. It is based on several things: the regulations that apply to us, the standards we want to achieve that leadership sets forth, as well as the hazards that we've identified in the workplace. Make sure you train workers on their specific roles and responsibilities in the safety and health program, whether it's basic stuff like the need to report things, or if you're going to assign specific maintenance of aspects of the safety and health management system to, a safety technician or safety coordinator, a maintenance manager, supervisors, or individual employees, like the need to check their equipment before each use at the beginning of the shift. That's a responsibility that employees have. They're going to need to be trained on how to do that and what to identify. Also, train workers on health identification and controls. Make sure that they understand what an engineering control is, what a guard is for, and why it's important not to remove that. What's an administrative control or work practice? It's not a rule that we created just to, tell people how to do things. The reason why you perform these steps before engaging in this specific task is because X, Y, Z. Make sure they understand and appreciate why that is there. Another element of the safety program, of course, is the program evaluation and improvement. This is a living document. The expectation is that you, at least annually, review all the aspects of the safety and health program and look for opportunities to improve it. Improvement can be based on not just changing regulations, but industry best practices, but also events that have occurred in the last 12 months or recently, even near misses. You should be reacting to those, and improving your written safety and health program. It's also an opportunity to verify that the program, as written, is not only being implemented, but it is operating and is effective. And finally, you're going to want coordination and communication for other companies or contractors that come into your site. So do you have a contractor orientation who oversees the contractors when they're on site performing work? How often do you check their work? Do you require a lift plan if you have a contractor coming out and they're going to have a crane to lift a new AC unit on the roof? Do you evacuate the area of the building that's over that lift area or path? Things like that. You're going to want to address all those issues around contractors that come out to your site as well. So your written program needs to account for all of that stuff. Make sure that you commit to a program that will provide the level of safety and health protection for everybody involved, not just your employees, but the same level of protection for contractors or visitors. Okay? This is very, very, very important because your employees need to see that everybody's going to be held to that standard, not just them. There you have it. In a nutshell, I just ran down let's go over the summary then one more time of requirements for a safety and health program. Management leadership, number 1. Number 2, worker participation. 3, hazard identification and assessment. 4, hazard prevention and controls. 5, education and training. 6, program evaluation and improvement. And 7, multi-employer work sites, contractors, having an aspect of your program to cover contract employees as well. Quick rundown. I know this is a basic safety and health management system. Now, in other episodes I'm coming out with really, really soon. I'm traveling right now. I don't know if you can tell, but the sound quality on the last couple podcasts, being on the road. But what I want to make sure I cover is the safety and health management system, the basics and the elements that you should have or you should include in yours. But going forward, we're going to talk about, best-in-class programs like VPP. I'm going to start talking about the Voluntary Protection Program. The VPP is broken down into 4 elements, but they contain all of these, okay? I know it's confusing, but what OSHA has done with VPP is they combine the first 2. Management commitment and employee participation or employee involvement. That's one element of VPP. Worksite analysis is the second element. Hazard prevention and controls is the third. And safety and health training is the fourth. And in all 4 elements, there are provisions for contractor safety and health as well. So they've wrapped all these elements up into 4. So they kind of leaned it out for you. All right. I will get into VPP, especially for listeners who are really interested in going above and beyond. If you've got a really good solid foundation, a great safety culture that's engaged, and you feel that you're ready to submit an application to OSHA to participate in the VPP program and become a STAR worksite, we're going to have several episodes. I'll share some tools with you to help you get ready as well. But that's coming up, so stay tuned for those. I hope you enjoyed this rundown of a safety and health management system. And please make sure you subscribe, leave a rating and review so that others can find us, and of course, so that I can improve the podcast. So I appreciate you listening once again. And until next time, be safe.
Thanks for listening to the Safety Pro Podcast. Be sure to visit www.consulthoffman.com for articles and information about safety services. To have Blaine read your question on the show, email him at customerservice@consulthoffman.com. Be sure to have 2 F's and 2 N's on Hoffman. Until next time, be safe.